Leadership of National Assembly says it will continue to enhance all legislations that will guarantee the well-being of Nigerian workers.
Minister of State for Environment says Nigeria will build on technological innovations to spur development.
War against insurgency. Nigerian Air Force acquires more aircraft to consolidate on its operations.
And on Good Morning Nigeria today, we focus on the Nigerian worker and labor relations today.
All right, now let's begin this way. The relationship between government and organized labor unions all over the world are basically characterized by one thing: controversy. Now, in most cases, organized labor are usually uncompromising in their agitations for improved welfare of its members.
Well, in general, unions, as Claire has just indicated, tend to disagree with government on policies or programs which they consider to be inimical for the progress and welfare of their members. But essentially, the way labor unions respond to issues differs from country to country.
Now, over the years, we've seen relations between organized labor and successive governments in Nigeria go sour. And again, as Kingsley said, it's over policies they consider harsh, especially issues of workers' salaries. And of course, remember, Kingsley, the issue of increase in pump price.
Of refined petroleum products. Nigeria, obviously, as we all can recall, has witnessed a number of strikes, protests, and rallies by the labor unions, or the umbrella body, that's to say the Nigeria Labour Congress, against government or various administrations, which have also in turn tended to evoke certain policies or laws in order to counteract the actions of the unions. Now, it's in recognition, nevertheless, of the contributions of workers and therefore of unions and then the umbrella associations to the socio-economic development of nations that workers are today celebrating Workers' Day or the International Labour Day.
Indeed, and as a build-up to the D-Day, the organized labor held series of activities, including roadshow, to sensitize the public on the celebration.
As a tradition, each year has a theme, and this year's celebration has labor relations in an economic recession and appraisal.
And of course, Kingsley, I want to guess that the theme of this year's celebration might not be unconnected, of course, with the economic situation of the country, of course, which has been in recession for quite some time now.
There's no doubt about that. Nigeria has been in economic recession since last year, but there are projections already that by June, or latest by the third quarter, the country will climb out of recession. So the theme for this year's celebration, once again, has to do with the Nigerian worker and, of course, the economic recession.
All right, of course, the questions we will be asking is what should be done going forward to enhance mutual relations between labor unions and government, of course, and what are the contemporary challenges facing labor relations today. Happy May Day.
Yeah, okay. And also, Claire, what's the role of the Nigerian worker, in helping the country climb out of recession, as we just indicated, because recession indicates that there's a decrease or a contraction in production in the economy.
What are they expected to play?
Absolutely. What role are they expected to play? That will be one of the issues that we shall be taking a look at into this conversation segment of Good Morning Nigeria.
I am Claire Delabu Abdulrazak, and let me first of all begin by wishing Kingsley Happy May Day.
I also wish you Happy May Day.
And Happy May Day to all of you.
All the workers out there, not the employers, by the way. Happy Workers Day. It was a pleasant weekend for Nigeria, by the way. We saw what happened on Saturday, with Nigerian-born Anthony Joshua, Olufemi Joshua, by the way, taking down Klitschko in the 11th round of the Ashedo 12-round heavyweight boxing contest.
And the world was silent, surprisingly.
Come again?
The world was silent.
No, well, they're silent about the fact that he's Nigerian. That's the point of the silence. But it's been advertised as British-born. He has Nigerian blood in him, and he's also admitted that Eba and pounded yam you know.
And that tells us that we must blow our trumpet. Nobody can do that for you.
It has 3 titles now: IBF, WBA, and IBO. But second Nigeria, of course, will have the heavyweight. We had Sam Peter during the time of the late President Yar'Adua. He also took the heavyweight title.
And just before we bring in our newscaster, Anne Jibono, of course, she's right here with us, and we'll get back to you shortly. Remember the half marathon?
That's right.
Surprisingly, not even the army, not the police, not the Navy, but the civil defense got all the medals.
Oh, well, that means that, you know, I think they've been in Sambisa for too long a time. So when
All right, let's welcome Anne Jibono, who is right here with us for the news. Anne, happy Workers' Day.
Happy Workers' Day to you, Claire and Kingsley.
Yeah, happy May Day.
Certainly. And good morning. Here's the day's news. Senate President Bukola Saraki has described Nigerian workers as the lifeblood and driving force of the nation's development in view of their invaluable contributions. The Senate President stated this in a statement signed by his Special Advisor, Media and Publicity, Yusuf Olaniyonu, to mark the 2017 Workers' Day celebration. Saraki lauded the resilience and commitment of workers in both the formal and informal sectors, describing their contributions to the nation and economy as priceless. He stated that the Senate will continue to work to establish and enhance all legislations that will guarantee the safety and well-being of Nigerian workers. Similarly, Speaker of the House of Representatives, Yakubu Dogara, has stated that the House is committed to passing the new minimum wage bill for Nigerian workers. He said that increasing workers' salary and wages has become necessary in view of the current inflation, naira devaluation, and rising cost of living. The federal government says it is committed to the enhancement of workers' welfare through articulation of different programs, such as the Federal Integrated Staff Housing Scheme, FISH, to improve the socio-economic well-being of Nigerians. Minister of Labour and Employment, Senator Chris Ngige, stated this in a message to the Nigerian workers to commemorate 2017 May Day, also known as Workers' Day. In the statement signed by Deputy Director Press, Olowokere Samuel, Senator Ngige says government acknowledges the resilience of the Nigerian worker and the economic challenges they face in all sectors of the economy. He appreciated Nigerian workers' contributions to national development, but particularly their solidarity to the change agenda and the fight against corruption. The minister urged the workers to continue to support the change agenda of the Buhari administration. Similarly, the All Progressives Congress, APC, also celebrates with the Nigerian worker in the formal and informal sectors on the occasion of the 2017 Workers' Day celebration. In a statement from the party's spokesperson, Bolaji Abdullahi, the APC thanks Nigerian workers for their strong support in the ongoing task to build a new Nigeria and bring about the change much desired by the citizenry. He said, without doubt, the economic recession has had a telling effect on the livelihoods of many working families and businesses in the country. However, the party, he said, is happy to note that the country's economy is gradually coming out of recession and assures Nigerians that the government of President Muhammadu Buhari will continue to work hard to improve the livelihood of every citizen. In other news, Senate President Bukola Saraki has called on legislators in the National Assembly to promote food security in their various constituencies by assisting farmers with fertilizers and modern farming equipment. It was during the distribution of 6 trailer loads of fertilizer to Federal Capital Territory farmers by the senator representing the FCT, Philip Tanimu Aduda.
Our parents and grandparents and our old people who are farmers, and the best we can do is to support them.
It now enhances we, the farmer, to farm and be able to gain the dividend of democracy through the fertilizer.
Well, the Chief of Air Staff, Air Marshal Sadiq Abubakar, says the acquisition of new aircraft by the Nigerian Air Force is part of plans to consolidate on the fight against insurgency in the nation. He made this known at the 75th Strike Group Air Force Base Flight Line Yola, while on a routine visit to assess the progress of expansion work at the base.
If you are acquiring more capability, people should be happy. And that is the way we see it. The assurance is there. Whatever we are doing, we continue to do, and we continue to use the new assets given to us, which will make it much easier for us.
Minister of State for Environment Ibrahim Usman Jibril says Nigeria will build on technological innovations that will spur growth and development. He was speaking while receiving members of the Health of Mother Earth Foundation in Abuja. The visit centered on concerns on genetically modified crops.
As we're living, technology will continue to evolve. It is our duties and responsibilities to know the right technology to use and to deploy in our day-to-day affairs.
The Minister of Niger Delta Affairs, Usani Uguru Usani, has directed the management of the Akwa Ibom State Office of the Niger Delta Development Commission, NDDC, to take inventory and a detailed report on the status of all ongoing and abandoned projects of the commission in the state. He gave the directive while inspecting some NDDC projects in the state.
If you are earning money, you should show evidence of work. So I think we should necessarily commit to good work. Do not tell me by the end of next week you are still compiling your report. If you finish 10 on Monday, send the 10. You can send in batches. I will not entertain any delay.
Well, that's the news for now. Good Morning Nigeria continues with Claire and Kingsley after this break. Happy May Day celebration.
If you hear a bomb explosion or gunshots of an active shooter, that might be a terror attack. At such times, always remember 3 action words: run, hide, report. Don't try to run towards the terror scene to save the situation, because there might be a second bomb blast or another attack. Run far away and take cover. Make sure you are safe first. Yes, it is in our nature to sympathize over the hurt, but remember, only trained personnel can help in such situations. When in a secured environment, promptly call relevant authorities and help will come. For anonymous reporting, call 09630-3250-5 or 0813-2222-106. If you see something, say something. Nigeria unite against terrorism. This message is brought to you by the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture. Coca-Cola?
Oh, it's happy hour. So, you want a free Coca-Cola, but you have to drink it here.
So what's up, sweetheart? You really look like you're up to something.
I have a secret.
Okay?
I'll be going to Europe next week.
Seriously?
Yeah.
Like you have your visa, your passport, your plane ticket?
No, not that way. Some men are helping us. We pay them, they take us through the desert, and then we cross the sea into Europe.
The desert, the sea. Isn't that the route where many have died?
Yes, it is indeed a very dangerous journey. In 2016 alone, 4,900 people died while crossing the Mediterranean Sea to enter Europe. Many were Nigerians. For the very few who survived the journey, they are forced into prostitution or other crimes just to survive. Eventually, they will be arrested and deported to Nigeria. Don't be a victim. Don't go this way.
This is a public service announcement brought to you by NTA.
You're welcome back to the program. It's Good Morning Nigeria, your favorite breakfast program, live here on the network service of the NTA. Let's talk business now. And the Nigerian Stock Exchange maintains an upbeat trend consecutively for 4 days last week. We have Kulu Mohammed on Business News with a quick review of major business activities.
On Business News today, we shall bring you a quick review of the goings-on in the business environment from last week. The stock market opened on a negative note on Monday as all-share index lost 0.39%. This trend was, however, reversed on Tuesday as trading on the floor of the stock exchange closed on a positive note, all-share index gaining 2.21% on Tuesday. This upward trend was maintained on Wednesday, sustained on Thursday, all through to Friday. In summary, the stock market maintained an upbeat trend for 4 consecutive days as only Monday ended on the negative. And now to Forex matters. On Thursday, 27th of April, the Central Bank of Nigeria offered the sum of $100 million to authorized Forex dealers. And in a statement on Friday, the 28th, the Apex Bank disclosed that authorized Forex dealers were able to pick only $85.69 million of the $100 million offered. The bank says the inability of authorized Forex dealers to pick up the whole $100 million was pointed to the fact that there was enough foreign exchange to meet legitimate Forex demands within the system. Last week also, the governor of Nigeria's central bank, Godwin Emefiele, said that with the current efforts by the federal government to revive the economy, the country should be out of recession by the third quarter of this year. In the same vein, while presenting a paper at Annan Day in Abuja last week, Minister of State National Planning Zainab Ahmed said the economic recovery and growth plan of the federal government, which targets a gross domestic product growth GDP of 7% by 2020, is on course. Today is May Day, and activities on the floor of the Nigerian Stock Exchange is expected to resume tomorrow, Tuesday. And as always, we shall be here to keep you sufficiently informed on the goings-on. Happy Workers' Day, Nigeria. That's business news at this hour. My name is Kolo Muhammad.
All right, thank you very much there, Kolo, for the business package on Good Morning Nigeria. Up next for us, we'll take a look at the headlines in some of today's newspapers.
And my pleasure to welcome Bayo Toyobi. Bayo, today is Workers' Day or May Day.
Yes.
Good to have you with us.
Happy May Day. Good morning. Good morning.
All right, Bayo, happy Workers' Day too. I hope you had a lovely weekend.
Yes, I did. Okay. Good morning and happy May Day.
All right. Okay, now let's begin by taking a look at the front page of this day newspaper. This day is our first newspaper that we'll be taking a look at, beginning from the headline above the nameplate. Says, once rejected by Nigeria, Anthony Joshua becomes champion of the world. And Tyson Fury accepts boxer's challenge. Tyson Fury, of course, had earlier beaten Klitschko last year. It says, once rejected by Nigeria, Anthony Joshua becomes champion of the world. Also there on the front page, improved dollar liquidity may boost banks' earnings. Details of that story can be found inside. That's at page 10. Now, the lead story, of course, has to do with the ongoing probe into the tens of millions of dollars found at a luxury flat in Ikoyi, Lagos. NIA probe report must remain classified. Bolaji Akinyemi warns. Bolaji Akinyemi is former Minister of Foreign Affairs. And NIA DG's confession opens can of worms. It causes disquiet among spy agencies. Another writer says DSS DG may be summoned and to reappear tomorrow. Is the suspended NIA Director General. Now, how Ekweremadu rallied Igbos to meet Kanu's bail terms. That's the other headline there on the front page. And lastly, we have police arrest Sule Lamido over utterances. Sule Lamido is the former governor of Jigawa State. Claire?
Yes, Kingsley, the NIA matter is a story that is trending on almost all the papers. And the Daily Sun, it's a lead story on the front page of the Daily Sun. And it's NSA under fire. That's, of course, caption Ikoyi Gate probe. NSA under fire. Lawyers fault Munguno's membership of panel. You can find details of that story on page 7. Of course, it comes with other stories. Ex-Jigawa Governor Sule Lamido arrested. He will remain in custody, says police. Details of that you can find on page 3. You can now see, of course, that story right there. Now, the other story, of course, to my right-hand column, that's to your left, Boko Haram sympathetic to Buhari, that's been attributed to Jonathan. It comes with a rider, Adeni faults ex-president on alleged distortion. Of course, in book, you can find the details of that story on page 9. That's the outlook of the Daily Sun this morning. Dayo.
Yes, today is May Day, and the chant of solidarity is forever will be rendered across the world. This is to reenact the protestation of workers for better conditions that started in Pittsburgh several years ago. To draw attention to the plight of workers, several public personalities have made pronouncements. The Senate President has lauded the resolve of workers and enjoined that the National Assembly will do its best to support them. Speaker of the House of Representatives, Yakubu Dogara, says the House Committee will not hesitate to pass any minimum wage bill that may come to it, because he reckons that there is inflation, the Naira has been devalued, and the cost of living is very high. However, the Labour Congress, on its part, has Ayuba Waba threatening that on no account should governors and the National Assembly push to remove the national minimum wage from the exclusive legislative list. He says that all over the world, the issue of minimum wage is on concurrent legislative list, and it is an issue of International Labour Organization. Ayuba Waba says that all over the world, minimum wage is an exclusive legislative issue, and it is an ILO convention to which Nigeria is also a signatory. Meanwhile, there are concerns because in spite of the bailout fund from the federal government, there are at least 12 states that are still owing workers' salary. Also, some of them owe as much as 15 months in arrears. Another set of persons who are owed are former workers, pensioners, who are also groaning. Kingsley talked about a young Nigerian, 27-year-old Nigerian Londoner who has won the world heavyweight champion. Antonio Olumide Joshua was like a jewel that was rejected by his country, and he went sojourned in London, and he is now the world champion. Several Nigerian sportsmen who have shown potentials are sometimes discriminated against, and they leave the shores of Nigeria and they blossom elsewhere. One of such is a renowned player, you know, Alaba, who plays in the German Bundesliga.
That's right.
He had wanted to play for Nigeria. He was frustrated. Today he plays for Austria. There are several other Nigerians like that, and we need to get our acts together. Nigerians have potentials. They are sought over all over, from all over the world, and we need to harness them to get the best out of them. Even Chilko, who was defeated, was shocked because he first floored the chap in the 5th round. The chap floored him in the 5th round. He got up and he floored him in the 6th round. In the 11th round, the referee had to save him when he floored him twice. And he says he's ready. Most world boxers, renowned ones, were at the ringside to watch Olumide perform this feat, among which are Leonard Lewis and Sugar Ray Leonard. All of them have given kudos to him. And the secret is not far-fetched. Many may not know, Anthony Joshua was once a sparring partner for Kichilko in Austria.
That's right, but he also says that he takes eba and pounded yam, and along with a goosey soup, by the way. So if you recall, Claire, the subject matter we discussed on Friday on Good Morning Nigeria has to do with eating right. So for an athlete, a boxer, he says, you know, pounded yam, a goosey, and you know, those ones.
By the next one, you should add apple to it.
Apple, yeah,
yes.
that's a source of real energy. But
Yes.
just before we take other headlines from other papers, look, one of the key features of that boxing match on Saturday was the fact that it was clean.
Yes.
It was clean, and the two boxers were professional. I know, Claire, this is not exactly your forte, but, you know, the bout was clean. I mean, you had no foul blows, and, you know, you didn't have the kind of things you will find with a Mike Tyson, for instance, you know, or some other very well-known boxers
Yes.
for their rough tactics.
Clinching and
that's
holding.
right. You know, clinching was very limited.
Yes, yes.
You know, the punches were smooth and clean.
I
And
heard the match had to be stopped at 11th round.
that was a TKO, of course. Klitschko had gone down the 3rd time in that round, and it was under a barrage of punches, so it was saved by the referee from further punishment.
This is not a sporting,
All right, here's it. So we'll take other headlines. It's a carryover from the weekend. Carryover from the weekend. Let's take a look at the New Telegraph for the headlines on the front page of a New Telegraph. Above the nameplate of the New Telegraph, you have the headline, gas flaring. That's the kicker. Nigeria's revenue deficit hits 167 billion naira in 1 year and loses 3,500 megawatts power generation. Now, the lead story has to do with the Ikoyi cash gate, 15 billion naira cash. NIA chiefs disown suspended DG. And Oshibajo panel set to nail Ambassador OK. And for the $3 million, not part of Jonathan's approval. This is attributed to the presidency. And also there on the front page, it says, Workers' Day, employees and government at loggerheads. And 2,000 teachers face sack in Delta. And NMA kicks over harmonization. NMA stands for Nigeria Medical Association.
All right, let me quickly take The Nation. And The Nation, of course, front page is quite busy this morning. But the lead story, 43.4 million naira, Oshibajo panel to quiz NIA bots again. Of course, we've taken some of these stories. And Catch Not Sludge Fund, says NIA. And DSS boss offers to testify at a panel. You can see the writers there. Now, Adeleke Oshun set up inquest. It's also trending right there on the front page. And there are other stories, of course, that you'll find the May Day. Now, of course, this is not the emergency call.
Mayday, Mayday.
Mayday, Mayday. This is Workers' Day. You can see, of course, the display there on the front page of The Nation. There are other stories. 535 Nigerians languish in Chinese prisons. You can find that on page 47. And Nigerian Immigration Service deploys 518 personnel from airport. It's also on page 6 of the same Nation. Doctors reject harmonized pay with nurses, and you also find the message coming from former President Olusegun Obasanjo to expatriates, and he says to them, respect Nigeria's economy. Details of that is on page 6. Ryan.
Yes, Claire, many newspapers are still speculating about the Osborne currencies that were discovered. But however, what has come clearly is that the $289 million that was said to have been approved in 2015 is said not to be part of these funds that have been discovered. The Nation reports that, in fact, those funds have been adequately accounted for, and they were for a different project altogether. And like Kingsley, you read, Professor Bolaji Akinyemi has cautioned that the report of the panel investigating the NIA currencies at Osborne should remain classified and should not be made public so as not to compromise national security. He says external intelligence operators do not belong in the same security category as domestic security, like the police, DSS, EFCC, and DSS. He says budget for external security are often called black budget because they are not publicly acknowledged. He says a mistake has been inadvertently made when no one with history of external intelligence experience was appointed on the panel. However, he said this can be remedied, especially if somebody would experience as a former NIA expert is engaged as consultant to advise the panel. He says on no account should the report be made public. He cites that even in history, the United States has only once had the Congress question the accounts of CIA, and that even came to nothing, that we should not compromise our...
yeah, Bayo, I think that's a very sound piece of advice coming from Professor Bolaji Akinyemi himself. At some point, he had also he was Director General of the Nigerian Institute of International Affairs, a Professor of Political Science. It's very important. Perhaps, you know, it's not a ground for speculation. I mean, the advice, therefore, would be for government at the end of the day to come out only with its recommendations relating to disciplinary measures, if any. not the details of what was released, who approved for what purpose, and so on and so forth. I think that's a very useful piece of advice coming once again from Bolaji Akemi. Just lastly, before we go, let's take a look at the front page also of the Daily Trust newspaper. Daily Trust has the other headlines we talked about: the arrest of the former Jigawa governor Sule Lamido, as well as the approval, whether or not by former President Jonathan, for the NIA $15 billion naira rather, found at Osborne. Now, at the foot of the front page of the Daily Trust, we have this window of headlines: "Don't sabotage our economy, Obasanjo tells expatriates." Details of that story can be found on page 6. And then May Day, that's the kicker: workers' welfare takes center stage. And McCarthy and Sheriff sell forms for Lagos local government polls. McCarthy and Sheriff, you know, they are the two contenders for the leadership of the troubled People's Democratic Party. Bayo.
Yes, the specific warning was from former President Olusegun Obasanjo, and he said, "Woe betide any person, be it Nigerian or an expatriate, who believes that he will live and corrupt this country." He was speaking at a forum of India professionals, and he said during his tenure, he remembered deporting some Indians. His predecessor brought them back, but the same predecessor had to deport them again because a leopard...
Successors. Successors.
Successor, yes.
That's right.
Because a leopard never changed his spot. He said that there are good Indian companies doing well, and it is encouraging, but there are ugly ones who have been doing what they will not do in their own country. Obasanjo said he will kick against entities in Nigeria or expatriate that use unwholesome practices to sabotage the self-reliant program of Nigeria.
All right.
Yeah, that's
any other comment from the two gentlemen here? Let's take a short break.
Two gentlemen of the press. They're also included.
There are no ladies among the press.
Today's Workers' Day.
Today's Workers' Day. All right, let's go for a break.
Hear the call of change. Stand up, Nigeria. Change is here and it's going to stay. Change begins with you. Oh yeah, make we go. Go to so let the change begin from within. Look at you, Ogerola. Change begins with you and me. Change begins with me. Change begins with me. Change begins with me.
Introducing the new 5 Alive Pulpy Orange.
Where is the pulp? The pulp. Where is the pulp? Where is the pulp?
Taste the goodness of real orange pulp in every gulp.
Where is the pulp?
The new 5 Alive Pulpy Orange, now in your neighborhood.
From the south-south to the northeast, southeast to the northwest, southwest to the north-central, the Future Assured project and its component, Get Involved, is restoring hope to millions of Nigerian women and children.
We are actually doing a lot under Future Assured, the program of Her Excellency Mrs. Aisha Muhammadu Buhari. And I believe what we are doing so far is impacting positively on the lives of women and children in Nigeria, particularly those in the internally displaced camps across the nation.
Get Involved supports the Future Assured initiative. Email programs@futureassured.org.ng. Future Assured, promoting and protecting the lives of Nigerian women and children.
All right, let's get on with our conversation on a very important day for all workers in Nigeria and all over the world. As we have said earlier on, we are celebrating today as International Labour Day, which is, of course, popularly called back here Workers' Day. To kickstart our conversation, let's listen into Ahmed Mbali's background report.
Looking up the description of the relationship between labor and employer, one comes across quite a handful of adjectives. Depending on where you are, labor-employer relations could vacillate between frosty or confrontational to cooperative, but hardly ever cordial. In Nigeria, the labor-employer relationship in terms of cooperation has neither been here nor there. Consistently, organized labor has engaged and prevailed upon government, which is the highest employer of labor, to address issues bordering on wages, better working conditions, and other such matters. Every year, the Labor Day provides an opportunity for organized labor to review existing conditions and to further engage government in achieving a worker-friendly nation. This year will, however, come with some intrigues. Against the backdrop of falling oil prices in the global oil market, which government maintains continues to affect revenue, and a recession which has seen cost of living rise astronomically, it remains to be seen how a balance is to be struck. Labour Union wants government to review the minimum wage, which remains at 18,000 naira, an amount approved at a time Labour posited the minimum cost of providing basic needs was 58,200 naira. As is the usual practice, both sides have been meeting to reach a position which takes into consideration all of the prevailing factors. As with every other thing in Nigeria of today, observers believe both labor and government need to dig deep so as to find a reasonable middle point. Trust, that scarce yet indispensable commodity, will serve both parties as they look to set labor-employer relationship on a footing not just for today, but for the future.
All right, thank you very much, Ahmad Ambali, for that background report. We, of course, have guests with us here in the studios to discuss the issues pertaining to workers and Labor Day, which is today. First, we'd like to welcome, it's always a pleasure having him join us on Good Morning Nigeria, Comrade Ayuba Waba, President, Nigeria Labour Congress. Comrade.
Happy Workers' Day, Nigerian workers. Good morning, Nigeria.
Comrade President with a small letter P, by the way. It's a pleasure to have you join us.
Thank you.
All right. And then we also have with us in the studios a director in charge of Trade Unions and Industrial Relations Department of the Federal Ministry of Labor and Employment. That's Mrs. Omabia Udeme Akpan. Mrs. Akpan, a pleasure to have you with us on the program.
Good morning, Nigerians.
Okay.
And of course, to complete the panel right here, right now, is former Minister of Labor and Productivity, Chief Emeka Uwogu. Chief Uwogu, it's good to have you with us today.
Thank you, Claire. Good morning, Nigerians, and then happy Workers' Day to the Nigerian worker.
All right, so let's begin the conversation by going back again to the incumbent president of the Nigeria Labour Congress, Comrade Waba. Comrade Waba, happy Workers' Day, but how happy are Nigerian workers?
Well, it's our day because whatever the situation, workers must recognize the fact that they create the wealth of every society, particularly Nigeria. And if you look at also the history of the May Day, is to recognize our contribution and also continue to contest for better policies, for better working condition, and also to improve working condition of Nigerian workers. Essentially, it's about decent work and also having to also make sure that those workers that create the wealth are able also to benefit from this wealth that they create.
Well, I asked, how happy are Nigerian workers?
Well, Nigerian workers certainly are not happy, looking at the challenges in the economy. They are the worst hit because our wages have remained very static, despite the fact that cost of living index have actually increased. A lot of factors have come in, inflation, more than 13%. Other costs have also come in, particularly the most important product. You are aware that it is the same year where the petroleum product price was also increased, particularly the petroleum product from 86 to 145. Also tariff on electricity, despite the fact that there is no power, but the costs have also gone up. And a lot of increase in cost of goods and services. These have actually affected the take-home pay of the ordinary Nigerian workers. Most of them can no longer take care of their family. They cannot send their children to good schools because everything has been privatized. So it's a really difficult situation that Nigerian workers are going through. To compound it, even the wages are not being paid as and when due, particularly also our pensioners. So it's a very dicey situation that Nigerian workers, despite all of this, they have remained very resilient and productive. So this is the situation. And that's why it is in the context of all of this that we have chosen the theme for this year's May Day to be labor relation in an economy that is in recession, an appraisal. We try to appraise the difficulty and the situation and how we'll be able to put our hands together to continue to represent the interests of those Nigerian workers that ought to be represented. They ought to get a better bargain, despite the lot of resources that we have. You can see from the revelations that are coming up, it's not about resources, but I think it's about getting our priorities right and also continue to drive policies that will improve the life of ordinary citizens. These are the challenges, and that is in the context of which this year's May Day has been chosen.
All right, let's look at the topic, the theme for this year, Mrs. Akpan. Labor relations would refer to, the system whereby parties to the relation that, of course, the unions representing the workers on one side, government or other institutions on the other side, exerts their influence. So with this perspective, how would you describe labor relations in Nigeria today?
Well, labor relations is the universal statement. And in my opinion, it comprises of regulations, enforcement of regulations, compliance with due processes. So my assessment of labor relations in Nigeria as of today is actually that it is stable in spite of the economic recession and the fact that the workers are worse hit by the implications of the recessions.
You say it is stable, and you've given out some parameters, for exerting influence, coming from both parties. Within those parameters that you've defined, rule of law, legislations and all that, do you think that we've had a stable, cordial relationship?
Yes, relatively. Because like Comrade Ayuba rightly said, workers have experienced a lot of austerity by reason of the recession, and in spite of it, they have maintained a harmonious industrial relations environment. Oftentimes we have picketing, but as long as the Federal Ministry of Labor intervenes, they are quick to stop all forms of industrial action. So I will say that they have been very matured in handling the economic situation they find themselves in now.
Sorry, Kingsley, what from government's perspective? Let's look at it from government's perspective.
Government perspective, essentially, we are not in control, so to say, of the reactions of workers when they find themselves on the wrong side of the bargain. But whenever there is an industrial action in forms of strike, picketing, work to rule, Federal Ministry of Labor is expected to be informed, or at times we just monitor and intervene. And when we do, all we do is to ensure that we engage the parties in social dialogue. That's trying to negotiate a way out of the issues with a view of establishing a harmonious or a win-win situation between the parties.
All right, Mr. Sakpa, thank you very much. Probably in the course of the conversation, we'll come back to some of the specific issues where labor relations have been somewhat contentious, with particular regard to either government or specific unions. Let's bring in now Chief Emeka Wogu, former Minister of Labor, into the conversation. Chief Wogu, you had quite some tempest to contend with while you were minister. Now, with the benefit of your experience, what would you say in 2017? Labor relations, the economy is in recession, even though there are indications that it's climbing out of it.
Well, thank you, Kingsley. Like you said, there were a lot of labor crises during my tenure. But it was not peculiar to just my tenure. It's been existing right from many years back. But what is important is the way you resolve those crises. Like Mrs. Akpan said, there must be social dialogue. people must talk. And in the common parlance, it is said that it's better to judge than to war. What I should say is that the current administration should sustain cordial relationship between government and labor and employers of labor. That is the doctrine of tripartism. Tripartism is a system where the government, the labor, and the employers of labor come together to discuss. And once there is social dialogue, there's always harmony in that relation of labor. And particularly, speaking from the legal point of view, on the exclusive list, which is part of the second schedule and part 1, item 34 promotes industrial relations. It also promotes trade unions activities to be done only at the center. It equally encourages workplace safety. And under the item 34, that's where the duty to prescribe national minimum wage. What usually brings strife between government and labor unions is situations where the wage is not commensurate to the labor of the worker, or where the minimum wage is not adequate to enable the Nigerian worker or any worker in any part of the world to live a good life, to be able to pay his or her bills. Again, workplace safety is equally an issue that has been raised by Nigerian workers in the past. So while I remain Minister of Labor and Productivity, there were so many issues, around minimum wage, condition of service, on safe places of work, and then we continue to discuss. And I inherited a lot of collectively bargained agreement, because collective bargaining is one ingredient in labor relations. Those collective agreements, we try to make sure that government implemented its own part. And once there's a dispute, it's either between the employer or the employee, or between employee and employee, or between breach of an agreement. And that is specifically stated in the Labor Act. And it is part of the ILO Convention. So while I lasted as Minister of Labor and Productivity, we had different approaches in resolving issues. One was not to be adversarial. I didn't see them as we, government, against the workers. We always try to create a balance where there will be a win-win situation, as alluded by Mrs. Akpan of the Federal Minister of Labor and Productivity. And once there is such relationship, then it is sound.
Okay, former Minister, let me take you back to the period, when democracy set in. Do you think between then and now, that's 1999 and now, there's been a narrowing of the gap, in the relationship between labor unions and government? At what point was this relationship cordial, and at what point did it begin to go south?
Well, let me begin from 1999, which is the onset of democratic parties in the country. The then president, Chief Olusegun Obasanjo, had his own peculiar way of relating to the Nigerian labor. And I think Adams Oshomole was the comrade president of NLC. First of all, President Obasanjo was the first president who increased the minimum wage from what it was to 7,500. It was President Obasanjo that put in place the Shonikon Committee on Consolidation of Salaries in both public sector and private sector. I participated in that committee as vice chairman of that committee. The main duty of that committee was to have a single salary package, which would be both attractive to people in private sector, so that there will be migration from private sector employment to civil service employment. And that document is still there. And I believe that if that document is put in place, it surely would help things the way it should be done. There are various other mechanisms that were put in place by the administration under which I served, that is President Jonathan's administration. The increase of salary at the federal level to 53.46% was done by that administration. And it was what the unions took back from the Eagle Square on May 1, 2010. And there was a national strike ongoing. The then president directed myself and Mr. Steve Orasani, who was the head of service, to go immediately and negotiate with the workers. So because of our revenue profile, affordability on the side of federal government, we were comfortable with increasing it to 53.4%, and it worked. But at the same time, there was a national minimum wage committee that had been put in place, headed by distinguished Justice Begore. Alpha Begore retired. And that committee came with 18,000. But one particular thing that stuck out was 18,000 was well bargained. Some states of the Federation came with proposals of up to 36%, 36,000 naira, 52,000, even organizations. But at the end of the day, we were able to discuss and come with 18,000 naira because that was what is affordable. That is what our revenue could sustain at that particular time.
And that was one of the most important achievements under your tenure.
Apart from that, there were policies that were put in place by me while I was Minister of Labor, approved by the Federal Executive Council, and that was in the interest of the Nigerian worker. We saved jobs that ordinarily would have been taken up by the Chinese and, foreign, let me not be particular, foreign nationals in Nigeria. There's local employment initiative, and which made it mandatory for every member that came to the Federal Executive Council to state the number of workers that will be employed by Nigerians, by the program. Yes. And then that saved Nigerian jobs. There were workplace, policies that made workplace, conducive for workers. And then we had policies in the area of
the workmen's compensation,
yeah, it was during my tenure that it became, we put in place NSITF, which is Employers Compensation Act, a commission put in place to implement the ECA.
All right. Well, Chief Wogu, thanks a lot. We'll come back to you in the course of the conversation. Let's go back to Comrade President of the NLC, that's Ayuba Awaba. One of the issues that Chief Wogu just touched on now, is pertinent to the theme for this year's celebration, which is labor relations and economy in recession. Since you're doing an appraisal, both the private and the public sectors obviously were affected by and have been affected by the recession. We've seen a lot of layoffs in the private sector. At some point, government tried to step in to prevent that. But one of the significant things that we have seen in the course of this recession is the fact that there have been no layoffs in the public sector, at least at the federal level. What's your reaction to this?
Well, I think it arose also because there have been a lot of contestation. Even the one you mentioned in the private sector, I know also that unions intervened in the oil and gas, in the banking sector. Unions and NLC intervened. And that is what actually brought us to the round table, where we have looked at a lot of options, and those issues were resolved. Particularly in the public sector, I think in some states, in particular, because of the fact that they have also tried to engage in this unending process of verification, where workers will be subjected to verification without an end, and in that process, they try to accumulate the payment of salaries. Particularly, one reference is Kogi State, where, as I speak to you today, the workers will not be celebrating May Day because they have 12 months of outstanding salary because of this issue of unending verification. So invariably, I think we have these challenges. Secondly, is also the issue of freezing of promotions, because promotion is a right, and therefore it's supposed to draw financial benefit. In most of our agencies of federal government, because of also the challenge, it has not been easy to pay the promotion benefit, which has now, I think, accumulated into billions of naira. So all of these are factors that were related to the issue of recession. But I think we must also commend the fact that because of various interventions, both at the Federal Ministry of Labour and through the NLC, I think we have tried to mitigate the issue of loss of jobs. That, I think, in the public sector is something that we must commend. But I think in the private sector, we lost a sizable number of workers because of the fact that some of those industries cannot access forests, they cannot import raw materials. Even if they import, the cost of production here at home is much more higher. It's easier for you to import finished product, and by so doing, I think in some of those industries, we have lost sizable number of workers. And therefore, this remains a very peculiar challenge that we must all respond to. And that have also compounded the unemployment market. Because there is no family today in Nigeria that will not find more than 2 to 5 graduates that have nothing doing. So to lose, for those breadwinners, to then lose their job, it means double jeopardy. And therefore, we must do everything possible. And that's why both us and the Federal Ministry of Labour have seen the imperative and the importance to make sure that we save jobs. Because once we don't save jobs, then the social system will be so affected that the issue of insecurity will then resort to different dimensions. And that's what we have been seeing now. We have seen that some other social vices, like the issue of kidnapping for ransom, have been on the increase. Those are some of the factors that are responsible. And therefore, it will be in our best interest as a country to try to save jobs and also create jobs. It's one of our responsibilities that we need to do. And therefore, government must find the way to make sure that our industries continue to produce. There must be favorable environment for those industries that are folding up to continue to produce, because that's the only way we can create jobs that are sustainable and jobs that are decent. So we will remain committed to that, but I think you have hit the point that certainly it has not been easy. It has been about contestation and try to save those jobs. But more importantly, you also know that workers, as they work, they need to be paid. They need to also take care of their bills. And those issues have been what have dominated our contestation at the state level, at the private sector level, and even at the federal level. And I think we have actually tried to make some improvement, but we are not yet there, especially when you look at the attitude of our states. I think more than 11 states, I can say for now, have not been able to pay their bills. So it's as if, well, those workers are still working, but they have not been able to get their dues as and when due. And this largely is about also how the state prioritize what is important. Some of the states have done extremely well, and I have said so severally, that they have gone beyond what we expected, and they have continued to pay their bills.
Okay, let's pause here for a while. I'm bringing Mrs. Ackman. When Labour says we will remain committed, to our cause, it means they will remain uncompromising, with their, of course, in pursuit of their, issues. And most times, and we've seen that very, very prominent under this administration, government evokes, certain policies or, laws, to, of course, sort of weaken or, get Labour to buy into government views and all that. Do you think that Labour unions have become excessive in their, in carrying out their responsibilities?
Not really, because they exist to protect workers' rights, to get better conditions of work for their members. And so I feel they have been true to their call. And on the other hand, government sees the need to engage them constantly in consultations, in dialogue, to ensure that as they pursue their rights, they do it within the ambit of statutory provisions.
Well, Mrs. Ackman, you talked about statutory provisions. I'll come back to that presently, but I just wanted you to follow up on the explanation provided by the comrade president of the NLC. Now, over the period of the recession, how tough has it been seeking to negotiate with employers and unions in order to stave off layoffs, either actual or potential?
Well, the issue of layoff is precisely retrenchment, redundancy, is governed by statutory provisions. Section 20 of the Labour Act actually states the processes that must be followed by both parties before
the redundancy is declared.
Redundancy is carried out.
Yes.
Not even the declaration, carried out. Yeah. Now, thereafter, government constantly will want to ensure that employers resort to redundancy as a last means of sustenance. And so I know that the Honorable Minister of Labour, whom I'm representing, Dr. Chris Ngege, had constantly engaged employers of labour and caused them to see the reason to resort to redundancy as a last means of sustaining their operations. We are also aware that aside from that, in the course of President Buhari's campaign, he had promised that there would be no form of redundancy at the federal level. And I also think he has been true to his promise. And that's why, in spite of the recession, we haven't had any situation of redundancy at the federal level. Now, in terms of getting better conditions, the Federal Ministry of Labour had tried to engage labor, that is organized labor, on the fact that they have got to be reasonable in terms of their demands. And I must commend that both the labor federations, the labor centers, that the Trade Union Congress, as well as the Nigerian Labour Congress, they have been very reasonable in terms of their demands. I am aware that there are some unions, especially in the oil and gas sector, who have not even gone into wage reopener. What that really means is that on a yearly basis, they are supposed to rebargain the wages. But because of the recession, rather than having workers retrenched, they have decided to hold on to what they had in the last year. So I think it's been a collective responsibility on the part of government and even the organized labor to ensure that workers are kept in their jobs, which I feel is perhaps the most important thing in this dispensation, because asking for more is a little bit too difficult on the part of the employers. And of course, because government is the highest employer of labor in the country. So I think employers of organized labor have been very reasonable in their demands, and with that, we've been able to sail through and maintain a very stable or cordial industrial relations environment in the country.
On the issue of layoff, which you've just talked about,
yes,
and the fact that it has to be last option. Recently, just about 2 weeks ago, some telecom companies and banking sectors laid off hundreds of workers, mostly Nigerian workers. Was that also negotiated, or was it in an arbitrary decision?
I'm aware because I think the two unions in the banking sector, that the senior staff union of banks and the junior staff, they have written to the Honorable Minister of Labour on the fact that the management of the banks did not follow due processes. And so we are looking into that. And of course, if they didn't follow due processes, whatever went on is illegal. So Federal Ministry of Labour is engaging the management. I'm sure that meetings have been called and meetings are being held to ensure that they do the needful, they follow due processes in disengaging these workers. Now, we must understand that we can't stop them if they are able to prove that the only way to continue to sustain their activities is by laying off some workers. Because in my opinion, it's better to keep the organization afloat instead of having them bankrupt and we have a total shutdown. It's good to have them work with a sizable number that they can manage. So I think we have to be reasonable, and I must say the unions have been most reasonable. It's only that in some cases, some employers choose to carry out redundancy arbitrarily without following due processes. And when that happens, we read the Riot Act to them.
Once again, one more time with you, Mrs. Akpan.
Yes.
Let's still looking at the whole issue of labor relations in a recession.
Yeah.
Comrade Weber, was talking earlier about the kind of challenges that businesses face. Various companies, some of them didn't have access to foreign. also deal with all kinds of fiscal measures. Now, in the policy matrix, how much of a feedback did the ministry that you represent here give back to either the fiscal or monetary policy authorities in the course of negotiating with companies or businesses, that inevitably, had to, downsize or right-size their staff?
Well, like I said, as much as possible, we try to carry out tripartite consultations between the employers of labor, the workers, and of course, we represent government. But in as much as we do that, there's a limit to which we can go, in the sense that management has a right to determine their operations, and government can only advise to a certain extent. But the final decision rests with the employers of labor.
All right, Mrs. Akman, thank you very much. Again, Chief Emeka Wogu. Chief Wogu, of course, you have a legal background. You're also a lawyer. We all know what the provisions are with regard to the Labor Acts and industrial relations, how you can call a strike and what the consequences would be. There are some commentators who believe that the principle of no work, no pay is virtually, as it were now, extinct under Nigerian labor law. What's your comment?
Well, like I said, basically, we are guided by the Constitution, the Labor Act, Trade Dispute Act, Essential Services, and the Trade Unions Act. Actually, no work, no pay is a provision of the law. I think Section 53 of the Labor Act. But I've heard recently commentators saying no work, no pay, no work. Yeah. That's what the labor unions are saying. Yes. No pay, no work. But it is a provision of the law. The Trade Dispute Essential Services Act listed all the organizations that are not supposed to go on strike, including the Nigerian police. But we can recall that in the past, some had done in the breach of the provisions of the law. Doctors ordinarily are not supposed to be on strike because they're on essential services. The power-holding companies, as it then was, which had been privatized, were not supposed to go on strike. But rule of law demands that both on the government side and the labor side, that people should respect the law. Again, one important thing which I believe should be mentioned is Section 40 of the Constitution, Chapter 4, which is the fundamental rights of every individual. It says, any person shall, is mandatory, be allowed to freely associate. And the two associations mentioned there, political parties and trade unions. So that means that anybody has the right to belong to any of them. But there are provisos that said you cannot derogate from the powers imposed on INEC. So that takes us to the current scenario where there is an emerging third labor center, which is, I don't know the name they call themselves now, I think ULC. But by the time we were there, what we had was the NLC, which is being represented by Ayuba Waba. We had the trade unions center, and then this emerging one, which is ULC. So the question is, have they acted within the purview of the law? And that is what the players in these labor relations should take into consideration. But as I speak, we have enough laws in this country to guide that relation. We have policies that will smoothen the relation between government and the unions, including the employers of labor. But one mistake people do is by saying that government should provide all employment. No. What government should do, in my own thinking, and that is the right thing, is to provide enabling environment for private sector to grow. And once private sector is energized, stimulated, there'll be creation of employment. Like Comrade President said, industries are being shut down because they cannot access foreign exchange to keep afloat. And that has led to job losses. So my own thinking is that the government, as it is, should put enabling environment for the private sector to really thrive so that employment will be created. But although the Constitution says every Nigerian deserves to be employed, but I think the government has a big role to play to make sure that they are not seen as the largest provider of employment. But once they take out the yoke from themselves by creating the enabling environment, there'll be jobs. Tomato industries are shut down. So many industries are going down. So instead of giving people money, which is scarce, to go and import toothpicks or to go and import cashew nuts, when we have them here, we should be talking about import substitution. So, and actually these things will not make those laws that are in place to work.
All right, thanks a lot, Chief Walgo. I was just wondering, Comrade President, what's your reaction to this? I mean, because virtually, I'm sure there are some of your affiliate unions that are on strike at the moment, and it's almost impossible for any employer of labor, particularly at the governmental level, whether federal or subnational, to enforce the no work, no pay policy. So is the law therefore now redundant?
Well, I think, let me try to make the point. People try to implement laws selectively, and that is not what is supposed to be the case. Laws must be respected in its entirety. For you to benefit from the no work, no pay, if we have a valid collective bargaining agreement with you, you also have to respect that agreement. Because what happens in most cases is where people violate valid collective bargaining agreement, they then now go back when the worker now want to withdraw his service. Because once you subject yourself to a social dialogue and process of collective bargaining, then you must also respect the process and respect collective bargaining agreement. Where you fail, you cannot also benefit from enforcing no work, no pay. That's why it has failed. It has also two edges. You don't pay me, you don't expect also to continue to force me to work. I'm not a slave. The difference between a worker and a slave is the fact that a worker works under a contractual agreement, which is binding on all parties. Where any of the parties fail to effectively implement its own part of the bargain, the other party have a right to also negate the content of that agreement. That's what the law provides. No. So the law is a two-edged sword. That when you want to enforce it, you must also make sure that you conform to all the provisions of the law. So that's why it has been difficult, and that's why also some of them cannot go ahead to try to enforce this. Recently, one state tried to say so. A state that has not paid salary for 7 months, and it comes to say that it wants to enforce the no work, no pay. That cannot work because the workers are not slaves. Let me also say that when we are also looking at the law, it must be holistic. Section 40 is regulated by Section 41. Freedom is not exclusive. And that's why the laws are there. And that's why the Federal Ministry of Labor must respect those laws, both international treaties and also the laws that we have been able to demonstrate. So when we are talking of issues, we must situate all of them within the argument of the fact that those laws are there and we must look at them holistically before arriving at a conclusion. So those are the issues and those are the facts. And that's why we have remained very resolute. While we respect the law, we also expect our employers to respect the same law. Where they fail to respect the law, then they don't also expect that we should not reciprocate by also advancing our interests and our rights. That's our contestation.
Before she comes in, yes, you remember this was an issue on Good Morning Nigeria, and we tried to ask if the law of reciprocity could be evoked.
Well, there's no reciprocal implication there. I mean, you have the former minister who is also a lawyer speak on that. But I think the Labour leader, has enunciated his points with regard to say, look, once there is a failure on the part of one of the parties to an agreement, then of course the entire agreement collapses.
Is that what the law says?
No, certainly not. If we go by some of the statements that the comrade has made, we are going to have a chaotic work environment, which is not stipulated in the law. Now, I totally agree that it is immoral, it's corrupt for a worker to work, and when it's time to pay the worker, you fail to fulfill your obligations as an employer. But having said that, I mean, that shouldn't give the organized labor the opportunity to go on rampage, so to say, because there are laid down procedures when your rights are violated in the Trade Dispute Act. you are expected to inform the Federal Ministry of Labor that your employer has failed to pay you your salaries, allowances, and then we put things in motion to get a redress. So I will still appeal to Comrade Ayuba and his followership that in the bid of trying to get your rights, you should follow the due process. You should uphold the rule of law. That's the only way to ensure that we have a conducive work environment, not just at the federal, but in the country for the good of Nigeria.
All right, yeah, Claire, I was just wondering.
I think I need to chip one thing in respect of that. We are not saying that operating outside the law. We are saying after you have followed all the processes laid down by law, and the employer is still recalcitrant to respect a valid collective bargaining agreement. That is the point we are saying. Must you continue to then force the worker to continue to work, even on an empty stomach? That's not what the law said.
All right. Comrade President, thanks. We'll still come back to this later on in the course of the conversation. Just a question for the former minister. There's been a contentious issue among workers, particularly at the federal level. And this has to do with the discriminatory wages between staff in line ministries and staff in certain parastatals. You know, this is a matter that the Wages Commission has tried to work on. I mean, let's be specific. The salaries earned by line staff in the ministries, for instance, couldn't be the same with those earned by those who are in the CBN, NNPC, PENCOM, or other, well-hid parastatals. What needs to be done, to ensure that there is a harmonization of wages across all MDAs?
Well, let me, earlier I talked about the report, Shonikon's committee on consolidation of salaries in both the public and private sector. What we tried to do while I was in office was to make sure that, there's some form of, justice and equity, by making sure that people earn salaries that are regulated by the Civil Service Commission or the Salaries and Wages Commission. But you mentioned some agencies of government. Those agencies of government have the acts establishing them. And actually, in some of the provisions of those acts, it gave the agencies power to fix their own remuneration. You agree, you equally, when you take it constitutionally, Revenue Mobilization, Allocation, and Physical Commission are constitutionally empowered to regulate salaries in the public, political offices, judicial, and the offices are listed, while the Salaries and Wages Commission is supposed to fix salaries in the civil service sector. So they encounter that problem of different acts, giving powers to agencies to fix their distance. But my own take about that is that we must have a single salary structure in the civil service so that there will be no disparity in salaries among civil servants. Rather than motivate the workforce, it demotivates. Where you have somebody who is doing exactly the same thing you do in the core ministries, and who is supposed to be on level 16 or 14 or 15, and then the person in the core ministry is earning like XYZ amount of money. The other person in another agency that probably is subordinated to the line ministry earns almost 3 times the salary of that person. It demotivates. So what the government should do is to find ways of consolidating the salary structure, and that will enable people crisscross. Those people, when you post them to the core ministries, they refuse to go. That's because what are they going to do there? The salaries are not as attractive as what it should be. And we had instances of the CBN, like you said, an NPC, PENCOM, FIRC, NCC, and all that. That's discriminatory. Workers should be treated according to the civil service rules. And there have been reforms. Even when we did the increase in the salary structure at the federal level, there was disparity between the PAMSEC and directors. So we tried to cure it because there was a huge gap. And that is what is called relativity in terms of salary fixing. So when you weigh those agencies and the disparity is so much. So the relativity theory does not even apply there. So I think it should be discouraged. And I still insist that if this current administration would go back and look at the Shonikon's report and look at what we'll call the experts committee that came up with proposal to cure this in the civil service system. And there was a white paper report which I chaired. And in that white paper report, which has not been implemented, we advocated for a process where there be no disparity among salaries of workers.
Just before we let you go, a brief response. Labour is asking for a new minimum wage, and it appears that the Assembly is probably positively considering it. From your experience, how can Labour achieve this demand for a new minimum wage?
Is it feasible, by the way?
Is it feasible?
Well, it's not by the rule of the thumb. First, what has to be put in place is a committee. During President Jonathan's time, it was the Justice Alpha Begoria Committee, which had the tripartite partners. So what I'm not too sure is whether such a committee is in place. First step is to have a minimum wage committee, and then they begin to discuss, and the minimum wage is fixed, and there are scientific and objective procedures to follow. Availability of funds, revenue profile,
cost of living
affordability, index. Cost of living index, and generally the economy. And then once those things are put in consideration, I think we should be able to have a minimum wage. The current 18,000 was fixed by the last administration, which I was part of, and is in 2010. But a lot of things have happened between that time and this time in terms of macro and microeconomic
dynamics.
Yes.
All right.
All right. Well, yeah, that's, we'd like to thank the former Minister of Employment and Productivity. That's Chief.
Labor and Productivity.
Sorry, former Minister of
the employment wasn't there.
Of Labor and Productivity.
Employment.
Employment is the new carnage. Chief Emeka Wogo, we'd like to thank you for being part of our discussion this morning. Thank you. We hope that you also felicitate. Probably go to Eagle Square. I'm sure they will welcome you back.
Well, when I came in here, I was the only person who I thought I would have this. And usually I had a good relationship with the Nigerian labor organization. And to the Nigerian worker and the workers, I say, Happy May Day. Happy Workers' Day. We used to say Boza. Boza to the current president. Boza.
All right, we'll take a short break. When we come back, we've received, of course, a tweet from you, and do keep them coming in. The Twitter handle is right there on the screen at NTA Chairman.
Olachi, come and receive your punishment.
I'm sorry, ma.
Olachi, come on.
I am something. You mostly depend on me for the smooth running of the domestic activities of your family.
Make sure you prepare food. That rug in the visitors' room.
Yes, ma.
Wash it thoroughly because that thing has been smelling.
I am a helper in your family and business. Many times you thank me with a slap.
I said it.
House help, gateman, sales girl, PA, and so on. This week, Professor John Bull takes a deep look at issues of assistance in life jackets. It is funny.
I doesn't want that.
This man, they look for who to give belly.
It is deep.
Showing at 8:30 p.m. every Tuesday and Friday on NTA Network International and Star Times.
Over and out.
Brought to you by Glow.
Welcome to the new speed of life.
Chewing gum neutralizes bad odor. It doesn't just disguise them, it gives you real minty breath.
Admission forms for the 2017-2018 academic session of NTA Television College JAWS into its diploma programs are now on sale. The diploma programs are in film and TV production, broadcast journalism, and TV engineering technology. Applicants are required to have at least 5 credits, including English language and mathematics at SSC, NECO, or GCO levels in not more than 1 sitting. Application forms can be obtained from the TV College Refi JAWS or at any NTA zonal centers nationwide on payment of of a no-refundable fee of 7,500 naira in bank draft in favor of NTA Television College. Completed application forms should be returned to the Office of the Academic Secretary, NTA Television College, or the Center of Purchase on or before 28th of July 2017. For further inquiries, please call 0806 980 9807 or 0703 660 7155. NTA Television College, training you to be the best you can be.
All right, you're welcome back. But if you just joined us, it's Good Morning Nigeria. We are reaching you live on Africa's largest television network, the Nigerian Television Authority. Of course, today is Workers' Day, and we still continue with our conversation. We've been joined now by another guest at this time. He is Mr. David Dokino. Dokino is the ILO representative, so he's representing the ILO chief for the office here in Nigeria. Of course, the ILO specialist, the office also covers activities, labor activities in Nigeria, Sierra Leone, Ghana, as well as Liberia. Mr. Dokino, a pleasure to have you join us on Good Morning Nigeria today.
Thank you very much.
All right. Now, just before we pop our first question to you, my colleague Claire indicated that where tweets had come in, so we'll take those first set of tweets, and then we'll continue with the conversation with our guests. Now, Tega is saying their tweet says Nigerian civil servants are the most marginalized, and the government should do more to tackle the collapsing system because urgent intervention is needed.
And Festus Akimboyewa, that Nigerian workers still work with skills, passion, and sheer hard work in the face of economic injustice shows Nigerian workers are a blessing.
And then we have this from Innocent Yawa James. It says, labor is what every nation sees as the engine for development. But the workers are not happy in Nigeria due to poor salaries and wages after 35 years.
And this is an interesting one, Kingsley, and of course, gentlemen and lady. Happy May Day, Nigerians. It's coming from Cecilia Okoroma. Nigerian civil servants must remain apolitical, not politicians, come business tycoons at work. Kudos to NTA.
That's right. Some of them are traders. They are alleged to be traders in their offices. Now, Otega is saying more their tweets one more time. Says the Nigerian civil servants must seize this opportunity to make sure that the government is more friendly towards the welfare of workers.
And Innocent James tweets, labor crisis, wages, salaries, and condition of services are all problems in Nigeria.
And then Festus Akimboyewa again has another perspective. It says, sad that other countries are plundering our professionals because government failed to grasp the challenge facing Nigerian workers and address them. Please, what is happening to ex-Nigerian Airways staff?
And Sani Michael Omakoji, it's so sad and regrettable the way and manner Nigerian workers are being handled by politicians who are serving as leaders.
Cecilia Okoroma tweets, NLC, as you canvass for improved pay, preach also about the moral decadence and corruption that is shamefully at its peak in Nigeria.
And here again is Sani Michael Omakoji's tweet. How can you keep workers for 15 months without salary and expect him or her to be fine? Kogi is a case study.
All right, well, those are some of the tweets that we are taking in the meantime. Earlier, we introduced David Dokino. David Dokino, perhaps we should borrow from a comparative perspective on labor relations issues across, shall we say, Anglophone West Africa, other than the Gambia, which we do not cover. What is the state of labor across the 4 countries that you superintend?
Yeah, let me first use the opportunity to congratulate Nigerian workers for working very hard to sustain the economy of Nigeria and to congratulate them for the celebration of Workers' Day today. Now, the labor situation within the West Africa sub-region is almost of the same level with some minor changes or variations within the national context. The most common phenomenon among the sub-region is the fact that there are social dialogue structures within all the countries where workers, employers, and government are able to sit down to discuss issues of common interest or issues that affect the interest of workers. And this, we from the ILO think is very, very crucial and important in sustenance of employment productivity at the national level. All the countries also have legislations which binds the activities of the social partners within the country. And so, to a larger extent, I said that there is some level of cordiality within the countries with some minor challenges, particularly in terms of Nigeria because of the recent economic crisis that Nigeria has found itself in. Of course, Nigeria is not peculiar to this phenomenon. All over the globe, or all over the continent, there are some, almost all the countries are going to some economic challenges one way or the other.
All right. Now, well, I mean, part of the experience that we have seen in Nigeria, as I said, you know, but it's not sure now, but I'm sure there's some unions that are on strike in Nigeria. What is the experience like elsewhere in West Africa? Do you have, you know, a history or a frequent reoccurrence of wildcat strikes?
Yes, I mean, there are elements of strike in Ghana when government goes or employers go against agreements that have been signed by the parties, and I mean the employers do not fulfill their part of the bargain. But it is not very widely spread. But I think that the most important thing we from the ILO want to encourage the social partners in each of these countries is the fact that rules and regulations that they themselves have come together to promulgate, to regulate the labor relations environment, the parties should be seen as working to ensure that those regulations are respected by all the parties involved. Because the challenges come where one party refuses to comply with the agreement or some element of the agreement, then the other party is also forced to do things which sometimes will go even beyond what the law stipulates. So we try to encourage the parties that when there are even difficulties, the most important thing is that let's go to the table and talk. Sometimes government or employers may have genuine concerns, but if you are not able to bring the workers to the table to discuss the issue for them to know, the workers also may have some ideas they can also bring on board to help resolve the issues or to help solve the problem. But if the environment is not created, if the workers do not feel comfortable that they can go to the table and express themselves and speak their ideas and then help resolve the issue, then it will become difficult for the fair and reliable industrial relation environment that we're talking about that can ensure that the countries grow and develop will be realized. So social dialogue for us is very, very crucial.
Okay, Mr. Dukenu, let me have you speak to the issue of no work, no pay rule within the provisions, legal provisions of the ILO. Now, in a situation where one of the parties, you know, to the relation, in this case, the employer, you know, fails to meet all the obligations as, you know, provided by the trade union, does the trade union have the right, you know, to invoke reciprocal powers?
Now, as I earlier indicated, we have the law, the labor laws or legislation, and all the parties must operate within the framework of the legislation. Now, if government violates any aspect of this legislation, I think the workers have the right to take government on in trying to deal with the issue. Now, at the ILO level, we have what we call supervising mechanism. If the employer or the government is not giving opportunity for the workers to articulate their concerns or raise the issues which borders their interest, the ILO system provides a framework within which the workers can report the government to the International Labour Organization that we have this challenge, we have that challenge, we have this challenge, and the government is not trying to sit eye to eye with us. And so we want you to mediate to help resolve the issue. That system is also there. But it is also important for us to encourage that as much as possible, we want to encourage issues to be dealt with at a national level. And if employers or government violate the law, they must also know that they violated the law and then be able to open themselves up to sit down with the unions to try and see how best those issues could be resolved. Sometimes it could just be an individual's decision to do something. But because the individual is representing the government or the employer, when he or she does something, he's doing it in the name of the government. So it is possible that government can still call the workers and say, okay, we do not fully agree with A, B, C, D, but we think that this is how the issue can be resolved. Come to the table, let's talk about it and resolve it. So the laws provide framework of resolving issue nationally. But if after exhausting the national framework and there is still no agreement, there is still opportunity at the international level to resolve the issues.
Comrade Baba, you've listened. Nigeria is a signatory to the ILO. In this regard, how far has Labour tried to pursue, its case objectively and within the framework of the law?
Yes, as rightly advanced by Dekino, ILO encourages social dialogue. And that's why Convention 98 and 87, which deals with the right of a worker to form union and also advance his interests, and also the process of collective bargaining, is one of the core conventions of ILO. And that's why our national laws have also demonstrated some of this law. All parties are expected to respect processes, procedures, and law. Importantly, is the fact also that the law recognizes that the party which is more stronger in the social partners, which is employer, can also act otherwise. And that's why in our law, strike is legal, it's legitimate. It's only that you have conditions that you must follow. You must give your employer notice that I'm not convinced, I've been suppressed, and therefore I want attention. And it's obligatory on the employer to give the union also attention so that those issues can be resolved on a round table. But where this fails, the last resort of the worker is also to try to not to be pushed to the wall. So strike is a matter of last resort. It's not Tea Party. No worker want to go on strike. No union will want to declare strike. But if he is pushed to the wall and the laws are not respected, that's when the unions now go on strike. We don't declare strike. We don't also enjoy strike. But it's also in our law.
It's a frequent thing.
Yes, but it also appears in the it's because the employer is the
Wild card.
Yes, it's because the employer is recipient. You are aware, in Nigeria, even when the police were not supposed to go on strike, they went on strike.
Yeah,
they were pushed to the wall. So those are the issues.
Yeah.
So we'll continue to respect those laws. As they cannot say, there are clear provisions in the law. And we have also had cases where some of these issues were taken to the ILO. Particularly the issue of immigration and customs services, where they were denied unionization unilaterally. There was a ruling on it, that they have a right. In South Africa, they are unionized. In Britain, where we borrowed our laws, they are unionized. So there was a ruling on that. So there are cases that are extreme, where we couldn't resolve them at national level. Those issues are taken to the ILO. And therefore, ILO has a system where those laws will be reflected upon, and the state will be advised on what to do. And those things actually have assisted us.
Comrade President, one of the cardinal planks of the current administration is anti-corruption. And I mean, we've seen and read about all kinds of stories about monies being unearthed where they were previously buried, and you have an anti-corruption campaign and war, in fact, going on. Now, some persons are also of the view that workers, Nigerian workers in particular, have a responsibility in this regard. The paperwork that is required, to perpetrate all these corrupt acts, normally will be written under the hands of Nigerian workers. Those who will help ferry the money or do all kinds of things. You have, there's a conspiracy theory tied around the Nigerian worker. What, therefore, should be the proper role or the fitting role for Nigerian workers in the anti-corruption drive?
Well, let me make the point very clear that for us as workers, and particularly the Nigerian Labour Congress, the fight against corruption is a priority. It's a priority because most of the challenges we are passing through is not because we don't have resources, but because these resources have been carted away by few. And that's why NLC and TUC have led 2 national rallies to support the fight against corruption, and also we made key recommendations. One of the recommendations is to protect the whistleblower and witnesses, because at the end of the day, some civil servants that have volunteered have now become victims of those issues. 2, we also have demanded that there should be a specialized court to fast-track the process of making sure that these corruption cases are actually addressed, because you have cases that are lasting for more than 15, 16 years now. They have not been decided. So it is a priority to us. And therefore, we have also informed our rank and file. Every worker must be committed to this fight against corruption. We may have 1 or 2 bad eggs, but certainly that will not deter us from doing what is right. And even in my May Day speech, we have demanded for these 2 laws, which have been pending at the National Assembly for the past 1 year, to actually have accelerated hearing and passage, because it's going to assist us. And therefore, all workers are committed to it, as shown by organized labor. All of us are committed. And therefore, I think we must give it a priority, and every worker must commit himself to that. And therefore, workers must also shun corruption. You also remember that we are part of the first group to actually canvass for capital punishment. The difference between us and what is happening in other countries, especially China, is the fact that we have not actually seen the effect of corruption largely on us. Most of those challenges we are passing through, it's not because of lack of resources. And I think some of the revelation of recent have actually point to those facts. So I think it is important for us to continue to say so. If we are not committed, we'll have not even advanced for the issue of capital punishment. It's our political elites that have just refused to agree that there should be a capital punishment. Why is it that if somebody steals a good, he gets 10 years imprisonment or 15 years? Somebody steals $1 billion, he gets maybe 1 year or 2 year imprisonment. So it's also selective. So the law must be strengthened, and we must be committed to it. So this is the position of Nigerian workers. All Nigerian workers are committed, and therefore it's something that we have to commit ourselves to it. So we are committed. Okay. And part of our demand is that these 2 laws, which are the bills? One, the bill that protects the whistleblower, and also the witnesses in court. We have workers that have been sacked. They have been denied salary because they are standing witnesses in corruption cases. One of the cases is Federal Medical Center, which we are aware. Those workers have not been paid. Despite the fact that we wrote to the presidency and commitments were made, we wrote to the Presidential Advisory Committee on Corruption, and they followed the case, including the FCC. So all of these need to be situated within the provision of the law where those workers will be protected. Because if they are not protected, then certainly there will be victims and the fight cannot go, cannot make headway. Then the second one is we need specialized courts because of the fact that those cases have been delayed unnecessarily. Just as we have the election tribunals where you have specified period of time where those cases can be dispensed with, I think we can do that. And therefore, those 2 bills, based on our first national rally, I think the executive have already transmitted these 2 bills to the National Assembly, and I think it will do a lot of good to all of us if those bills are passed into law.
I know, Kista, I know you want to speak to the specialized courts that is asking for...
I will speak to that.
Okay, exactly. Just hold on a moment. I still want to stay with Comrade Waba. Comrade Waba, the labor today, you know, I mean, it's popular belief that the labor today has lost its steam. In the past, when labor backs, government of the day catches cold. And that's because when you call out your men, you know, they respond. Today it's not the case because a lot of people believe that rather than pursue the productivity of workers, labor is just going one way direction. It's all about welfare, welfare, and welfare. And of course, you know, politicization, as someone tweeted, of your members.
Well, that issue cannot be correct because all through history, you must find out why unions are formed in the first place. From the 1886, unions are formed to defend and protect the interests of the worker and also engage in policies that will better the life of citizens. That's why we're there.
Do you have the support of you're asking for minimum wage now.
Yes, yes.
You listen to the former minister and all of that. Do you think this is a demand that has the support of the majority of your
Certainly, members? Even from the tweet that came in, 90% are in support of the fact that the condition Nigerian workers are going through is very tough, and therefore the wages need to be reviewed. All condition precedent to that are already in place. So what I'm saying in essence is that you have also seen we have carried out a lot of activities from one organization to another, from one state to another. You have seen the response. And therefore I think despite the challenge, because every situation also demands that you look at the issue and also respond to it, despite the fact that Nigerian workers are passing through very difficult times. It's a fact. And everybody accepts that. And therefore they cannot also sleep on their rights. That is what Nigerian workers will not also accept. They will continue to advance for better conditions because businesses are for profit. No business will actually put business in place just because he wants to employ a worker. Once they are not making sufficient process, the first victim will be the worker. and therefore he needs to be protected.
Well, that's we also.
So those
have,
are the issues.
You also have not-for-profit businesses, by the way.
Yes, you have non-for-profit businesses, but you also realize you must situate the contribution of Nigerian workers to national development in all the sectors. If you can write your name, you must appreciate the teacher. If you get sick, you get to the hospital, you are healed. You must appreciate the health worker. So those are facts. They have contributed immensely to national development. We create the wealth. The wealth of every country, every society is created by the workers. I heard somebody saying that workers should not have a decent life. No, that should not be the case. Workers must continue to have a decent life. And that is how they can contribute to national development and productivity.
Some workers have been owed several months of unpaid salaries. 15 months. We heard the case of someone cited.
No, I told you Kogi has 15-month arrears of salary. And they are on the street today. As I've talked to you, they are on the street. I've been to Kogi twice.
Yeah, Comrade President, you talked earlier.
So we have recalcitrant employees that we must continue to engage them. We can't speak on our rights.
Sorry, you talked about that recalcitrant employers, I believe.
Yes, employers. Sorry, employers.
You know, that's endless verification. Mrs. Akman, let's bring you again into the conversation. The former minister was talking about a procedure for, effecting a new minimum wage and what the issues are. We do know that, of course, there have been reports about what the current government is seeking to do in that direction. Can we have some brief elaboration on what's going on now with regard to the new minimum wage, assuming it is feasible?
You are aware that last year, government deregulated the downstream sector. And in response to that, I think the organized labor agitated for some palliative to cushion the effect of the increase in petroleum products. Because this present government is labor-friendly and sensitive to the plight of the Nigerian worker, they set up a technical committee to look into the issue of coming up with palliatives to cushion the effect of the increment in petroleum products. Now that committee recently submitted its report precisely on the 6th of April to federal government, and I'm aware that one of the recommendations of that committee is that the federal government should establish a tripartite committee consisting of organized labor, the private sector, and government to look into the issue of fashioning a new national minimum wage for Nigeria. So that is in the offing, and I'm sure that government will soon announce the names of the members of that committee.
All right, Mrs.
When something is in the offing, Kingsley, I hold.
No, well, it's in the offing, not in the pipeline. You recall there's a joke by stand-up comedians about something being in the pipeline, and then the resultant vandalism that occurred. But this is in the offing, so it's work in progress. Okay. Now, Mr. David Dokeno, let's get your take on this very briefly. Does ILO have any concerns about current labor relations in Nigeria? And if so, what are those concerns?
Well, we as stakeholders working with employers, government, and workers, we believe that the economic challenges that Nigeria is currently going through, of course, I think there are indications that the country is almost out of this predicament. But we believe that we need to encourage social dialogue in Nigeria. We believe that the parties should endeavor to meet regularly to discuss issues which are of mutual concern to the parties. And once the parties are meeting regularly, if there are any differences, the chances that those differences will be ironed out is very, very high. So we do not have any particular concern, but just to encourage and advise the parties that they should continue to dialogue. They should continue to use the various processes and structures of social dialogue within the country to ensure that issues of differences are addressed. The issue of minimum wage, which is coming up now, is also very, very important that there should be time frame for this committee that is put in place. It should involve all the social partners. They should be given terms of reference as to when their work should be completed and then adopted. And I believe once you give the time frame to the committee and the public knows and all the parties are aware, it creates an environment of trust that things are moving on and then when the agreement is reached, then it's also announced to the whole country. So that is what we will encourage the parties in Nigeria to continue to do, to uphold the tripartism and social dialogue concept. So that is what I can say as far as the issues in Nigeria is concerned.
All right, we have more tweets. Kingsley, let's quickly, within the few minutes that we have, Sakiru tweets, why can't NLC rescue Nigerian pensioners from state government that refuses to pay their end-time salaries?
And then we have this also again from Festus Akimboyewa. It says government should confront the endless crimes committed against Nigerian workers and punish any employers breaching health and safety in the workplace.
And Leka Michael tweets, there should be no Workers' Day celebration in Abia State, where workers have not been paid since the beginning of this year. Is that correct?
I don't think that's
not Abia. Probably that's a nearby state. That's a nearby state. That's also owing pensioners. I'm sure the NLC, that's not Abia. That probably couldn't be correct. But let's take this from David Jesse. David Jesse says, tweets, any governor that cannot pay his workers has no business being in government. It's disheartening the way workers suffer in our country. And then, of course, that's the much that we can take by way of tweets. We would like to thank our guests who've been with us at the discussion this morning. Earlier, we had the former Minister of Labour and Productivity, that's Chief Emeka Awog. We already signed him off. We also would like to thank Mrs. Omar Biedeme Akman. She's Director of Trade Unions and Industrial Relations Department of the Federal Ministry of Labour and Employment, representing the Honourable Minister. Mrs. Akman, thanks a lot for your contribution.
Thank you for having me.
And David Okeno, representing ILO Nigeria office, thanks a lot also for your insights.
It's a pleasure.
And Comrade President of the Nigeria Labour Congress, Ayuba Awaba, one bosa to you.
Well, thank you, Kingsley, and happy Workers' Day to all Nigerian workers. Thank you.
All right, then. Thank you, gentlemen, and of course, ladies. All right, we've told you, of course, the breaking news in sports. You'll get to see details of that boxing later on. But right now, let's see what's happening from around the world, and we join Yemi Ajay.
All right, thank you very much. On the foreign scene, South Korea and the United States have wrapped up their annual large-scale military drills that have continued a separate joint naval exercise that has triggered the threat of nuclear war from North Korea. The USS Carl Vinson aircraft carrier group arrived in waters near the Korean peninsula and began exercises with the South Korean Navy. But North Korea has threatened to sink the American Amanda. Tensions on the Korean peninsula have increased, with signs the North might be preparing a sixth nuclear weapon test, and with Washington refusing to rule out a military strike in response. Now in Africa, a spokesman for Tunisia's National Guard said a senior commander in an armed group blew himself up and another was shot dead during a raid by Tunisian security forces. The man suspected of having links with Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant ISIL and Al-Qaeda's North African branch Aqim were planning attacks. The raid took place in Sidi Bouzid, a town 200 kilometers southwest of the capital Tunis. Another 3 people were detained and security forces were hunting for another suspect. The National Guard spokesman, Colonel Major Khalifa Chibani, said the group had been under surveillance for weeks after communications about a possible attack were intercepted. And that's it from the foreign scene. We will surely keep you updated as more events unfold. Bye for now.
All right, thank you very much, Yemi Ajayi, for the report on the foreign scene. Let's go over now to Gufan Shaji for stories on dancing in the arts and entertainment segment.
Thanks for joining us on Arts and Entertainment. There certainly is more to dance than its literal meaning. It is a source of enjoyment, a stress reliever, or simply an exercise. When in the form of folk dance, it also connects to the spirit of the land. These dances are about history, about traditions and exotic beauty of the land it is associated with. The International Dance Day, which seeks to attract the attention of the wider public to the art of dance, was recently celebrated. Let's take a trip around the globe as we view some dance steps. The Fandango of Spain. beautifully intricate. The Irish step dance is a combination of fast-paced leg movements set off by a relatively stiff upper body. The Adumu dance from Africa. This is a Maasai dance performed during the coming of age ceremony for warriors who are called Onutu. The ballet from France. Indeed, a sophisticated art. Then in Nigeria, the Swanga dance from Benue. The Bata dance in the southwest and the Atulago of the southeast. Dance has without a doubt evolved and has given birth to some of the contemporary dance moves we see in Nigeria, like Azonto, Skelewu, and a host of others. Where there is reading, there is dance. To further encapsulate this, Nigerian Television Authority celebrated the International Dance Day. The Dance Day seeks to promote the art of dance around the world. This special day is all about the history of dance and the recognition of its place in society. Pretty amazing, right? So celebrate this International Dance Day by learning about the history of dance, or perhaps even learning a new dance for yourself or with a group of friends. It is a great excuse also to sign up for those dance classes you've always fancied. Well, that does it on Arts and Entertainment. I am Kufan Shaji.
All right, it was quite windy last night in the MNK district where I live. Some rooftops were blown up, electric poles pulled down, but the accompanying rain was quite a pleasant, development.
Well, yeah, unfortunately, it wasn't in all parts of the FC that we experienced
MNK district.
It was windy, but, we had light showers elsewhere. Okay. MNK, that's Mararaba Yanyan.
I don't know. It's MNK right. District, Kingsley.
All right, just let's know what the weather prospect will be for the rest of the day.
Good to have you join us on the weather segment. I'm Adidonlu Adamlola. With more influx of moisture entering into the country, extending even up to the northern part, this is expected to result in cloudy conditions over the entire country, with some sunshine intervals, especially over the northern part of the country, with the exception of Jalingo, EB.
In information, entertainment, the first, breaking the news. We are Africa's largest network.
This is the network service of the NTA.
To look at a window on Abuja is very, very interesting. Be you a civil servant, be you a business person, we are going to look into your working day.
I resume by 8:30, and I, say my prayers, before the commencement of the day, and then I go through my mails, if there's any mail I need to quickly respond to, and then I look out for files I need to approve, requisitions, reimbursements, and all of that.
All right.
And then observe